So I don't know when you guys are starting your fantasy football drafts. I have my first one tomorrow, Mike. So my first of a few. So, football, I've got my back home friends, and then I've kind of got the Vegas Friends League, and then I've kind of got the all over Friends League. So the 3 different leagues that I'm in fairly, at this point, we've been doing it long enough to where it's fairly high stakes, enough to get your, enough to make you feel, you want to win with all this. So you're taking some draft stuff that you're looking at, and I'm sure you're trying to figure out who you want to draft. But, there are 5 just kind of stuff that we wrote down here. And actually one that I can't wait to get to because I actually disagree with that Mike threw in there. So I want to debate that one a little bit. But kind of the obvious stuff, Mike, obviously knowing your league rules and scoring very well. Because, again, do you get 4 points for a passing touchdown? Do you get 6 points for a passing touchdown? Do you get half a point for a reception, or do you get a full point for a reception? These change the values of quarterbacks and receivers and running backs and all the things like that. So, again, that's just kind of your very basic rule that everybody should use.
Yeah, especially important when you're in new leagues. Generally, if you've been in a league for a while, you kind of understand you're rarely going to see these points structures change when you're in a fantasy football league. Big part is what's allowed in the flex. Is it just running back, wide receiver? Can you include a tight end? Some flexes are now quarterback leagues. So you got to understand what the setup is from your lineup perspective and the scoring perspective to make sure you draft accordingly.
Don't draft a kicker or a defense unless your league makes you do it. And if they make you do it, then do it with the last 2 picks of your draft. No kicker, no defense is worth using a spot outside of those last 2 picks because, again, you're trying to just draft for upside. You're trying to draft to win a league. Most likely, you're going to end up streaming a defense somewhere along the way, as it is anyway. And then certainly from a kicker perspective, it's just the most there's so much variance involved with all of that. Yes, there are some kickers that are better than others, but at the end of the day, Mike, you're betting on a team to be good enough to get them into field goal range, but then bad enough to not actually score touchdowns. I mean, it's just, there is no way to predict week to week basis what a kicker is going to do. So again, just don't waste any of those valuable picks on a kicker or a defense.
So I shouldn't be taking Brandon Aubrey in the second round of all my drafts.
No, honestly, your league probably shouldn't even have kickers anymore. To be honest, just get rid of kickers. But yeah, it's completely random with all that. Pay attention to other teams during the draft. What are they doing? Is there someone you can see that maybe is a little more biased towards a position or is needy in another position? You can kind of start to predict where people are going to go. And if you have your eyes on a specific player, Mike, then you might have to go after that guy because hey man, if this thing wraps back around to this guy, he's certainly going to go there. And so you just kind of got to make sure that you don't leave yourself in a bad position.
Yeah, position scarcity changes during a draft or an auction. And you'll see tiers of players where maybe there's, 4 or 5 quarterbacks that you really want. And that 6th one, there's a big drop off. If you're in an auction, if you're in a draft, make sure you get one in that tier before that drop off happens. And a good way to kind of understand where that when that player could go is looking around you, right? Do all the teams around me have a quarterback? Can I wait? Or do it, if it's an auction league, does everyone have their first and second quarterback already? What can I do to be able to lock this position up? So make sure you understand position scarcity based on what other teams' needs are as well.
I'm going to keep the one that we're going to debate for next segment so people can stick around. So there you go. There's your tease. Me and Mike are going to go at it. But the last one, just don't get cute. And this happens a lot of times. It's people will have, let's use a very extreme example here, Mike, where you've already drafted Patrick Mahomes and then 2 rounds go by and Lamar Jackson's still sitting there and you go, well, why is Lamar Jackson? You know what? I'll just draft Lamar Jackson. Someone will trade me for him. No, they won't. They won't. It doesn't happen. And if so, you have to give him away for pennies on the dollar. Same thing happens at the tight end position all the time. You've drafted Travis Kelce, and then you're sitting there why is Dalton Kincaid still there? You know what? I'll take Dalton Kincaid. Someone will trade me for him. No, they won't.
Yeah.
No, they won't. You have to give him up for crumbs. We went to break. We were talking about kind of these fantasy football drafts rules to kind of live by because these are things that are coming up for everybody, right? Again, like I said, my first one is tomorrow. Know your league rules and scoring. That seems self-explanatory, but a lot of people don't know sometimes, a commissioner made a change. We're going from half point to full point this year. We're going to go from 4-point passing touchdowns to 6-point passing touchdowns this year and all. So just little things that you want to make sure that you're on top of. Never drafting a kicker in a defense unless you have to in your draft. And if you have to, make sure they're your last 2 picks. Paying attention to other teams in the league out there, Mike. We want to make sure that the teams that, need this certain position, you kind of know where they might be going for the next couple of picks. You've got your eye on a dude and you know that if it gets to them, he's going to be gone. You might have to go ahead and pull the trigger on him. So that's something you want to do. And of course, we talked about not getting cute because you want to make sure that you are doing what's optimal for your team and not trying to do this whole 4D chess thing where you're like, well, I'm going to get 2 of the top 6 quarterbacks and someone's going to come with an amazing trade offer to me. No, they will not. You're going to end up having to give away one of those guys for dust, and that's not what you did. You basically wasted a draft pick. But this is the one you threw in there, and this one I think there's an interesting debate on because you put plan for the playoffs. I will cede the floor to you here on this one.
Yeah, you got to make sure that you look at the late schedule for the guys, especially early guys that you are taking, and that they're not in a suboptimal position when the most important fantasy games of the year are happening. You play to win the game, Matt, and it's important that you put yourself in a good position to win even early. And like I've talked about Jared Goff a bunch on this program, as of you. We both really like him. We talk about how 14 of his 17 games are indoors. Guess what? Most playoffs, the semifinals and finals, he's outdoors in Chicago, outdoors in San Francisco. So while he's someone who could definitely help you get to the playoffs, he is someone who could cost you your fantasy championship if you make it with him in the playoffs. So I want to look for players who have positive schedule situations later in the season, or if I'm going to take someone like Goff, I want to make sure I have someone behind him that I can plan on starting that week 16 and week 17 when I believe I will be in the championship game or in the semifinals, but have a suboptimal matchup with one of the guys that got me there.
See, this is where I actually think this one falls into mine of not getting too cute. And I think that this is getting too cute when it comes to drafting because you're playing your studs no matter what. It just kind of is what it is. So you're not looking out at the fantasy playoffs and you don't care who Jamar Chase is going to be going up against. You don't care who Christian McCaffrey is going to be going up against. It doesn't really matter along the way. And then at that point, what are you really looking at? You're like 6th round, 7th round pick, and you're worried about like who the fantasy playoffs. Like at that point, you're just trying to take the best guys out there to make sure that you have a well-rounded roster. You got to make the playoffs before you worry about what's going on in the playoffs. And so for me, this falls under getting a little bit too cute. I don't think that I think that if you focus on all of the other stuff far more heavily and you focus way more on just making sure that you have a solid team and that you're not, if you want to, I think it's probably more best to like plan for bye weeks as opposed to playing for the playoffs. Because, if you end up costing yourself something where you have 5 different guys that are on bye in the same week and you definitely are just giving yourself an L and things like that. I think those are stuff that you can do a little bit better than playing for the playoffs. So you and I are not seeing the same way there on that one.
Well, I agree with you. You do plan for bye weeks. That's something that I feel like it's almost obvious. That's why I didn't even put it in there. It's like one of those things where, hey, you don't have 7 guys in the same bye. That doesn't make any sense. But I am all about planning for the playoffs in my league. Look, fantasy football, most leagues, it's not hard to make the playoffs, right? It's 8 of 12. It's, you've got the majority of the league in the playoffs. So for me, I'm not worried about making it. I'm worried about winning it. I want to win leagues that I'm in because no one remembers who finished second in your fantasy football league, right? It's all about getting the W. And I think it's important when you're sitting there and you have a tier of 4 quarterbacks that are all very similar and you're sitting in round 6 or 7. Who has the better matchups at the end of the season? Who do you want in those weeks where your title is decided on your team? You're right. McCaffrey, Chase, you're starting them no matter what. But down the list, that when you get to that 6th round, 7th round, 8th round pick, you do have some drama of whether or not you're going to start those players. I think it's important to look at those late round matchups, late week matchups, and whether or not you want them in your lineup when you are playing for a title or not when you're drafting those guys.
I like us being able to debate a little bit on stuff like this because, it's like we can sit here and we can talk very civilly and I can just at the end go, I think you're wrong. No, but it's great. No, honestly, I think if you're playing super, super advanced, that is certainly something you can put into your strategy as you're putting things together.